deep dive. This time, we're going to be exploring this question, who am I? You know, one that we've probably all asked ourselves at some point.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those really big questions that has been around forever, you know?
It has, and today we're going to be looking at it through this collection of teachings called Who Am I? By Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. It's a series of 28 questions and answers recorded in 1902.
And they offer a really interesting and powerful path towards this idea of self-discovery and what's called self-realization.
So let's jump right in. The first question is, of course, who am I? And the text suggests this really, I think, a fascinating approach, which is to kind of go through and systematically negate everything we usually think of when we think about me.
Yeah, it's like a process of elimination. We start by acknowledging that you're not your physical body.
So I'm not just this collection of, bones and muscles and flesh.
No, not at all. And you're not defined by your senses, either sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing.
So even though I use my senses to experience the world, they aren't really at the core of who I am.
You got it. And then it gets even more interesting. The text says you're not even your thoughts or your mind.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about it. Your thoughts, they're always changing, flitting from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. My mind can be like a whirlwind some days. So if I'm not my body, my senses, or even my thoughts, what's left? What am I?
That is the big question, right? The text points to awareness. It says that's what remains after you strip everything else away. That's your true nature, like the core of your being.
It's kind of like peeling away all these layers of an onion to get to the heart of it, huh?
I like that, yeah. A good analogy. And this core, this awareness, is described as existence consciousness bliss. It's kind of a mouthful.
Existence consciousness bliss. Okay, I think I'm going to need some help unpacking that.
Sure, of course. So existence means that this awareness is like the fundamental reality, the ground of all being. Consciousness means that it's aware of itself, self-aware. And then bliss refers to this inherent joy and peace that come up naturally when you experience this true self.
So are you saying that deep down, under all these layers of who we think we are, there's this state of pure joy and peace that's just waiting to be discovered?
That's the idea. But there's a bit of a catch. The text suggests that you can't fully realize this true self as long as you believe that the world is completely real in the way we normally see it.
Hold on, are we saying the world isn't real? Is this where things get a bit matrixy?
Well, it's not saying that the world doesn't exist at all. It's more about questioning how we perceive it. There's this analogy they use about a rope and a snake. So imagine you're walking in like dim light and you see this rope on the ground. You might mistake it for a snake and then you react, with fear.
Oh, I've totally done that. Like your heart starts pounding and you jump back and...
Exactly. But then you realize, oh wait, it's just a rope, and then poof, the fear is gone. The world, the text is suggesting, is kind of like that mistaken snake.
So you're saying our usual way of seeing the world might be a kind of illusion?
Exactly, just like a mirage. It's not that it's not there at all, but it's not what it seems to be. To experience that bliss we talked about, we need to see through this illusion.
This makes me think about all the times I've gotten super stressed out about stuff that, in the end, turned out to be no big deal. Like I was reacting to a phantom snake the whole time. So how do we actually start seeing through this illusion? How do we stop mistaking the rope for the snake, so to speak?
The text says that it all begins with understanding what the mind does. It says that the mind is like this powerful force inside the self that is responsible for projecting the world.
Wait a minute, so are you saying that our own minds are creating this illusory world?
Kind of, yeah. Think of it like a spider spinning its web. The web comes from the spider, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, the text says our minds project the world out of themselves and then they get caught up in it.
Okay, that's a powerful image. But hold on. If the world is this projection of the mind, and the mind comes from the self, does that mean I'm creating the entire world?
That's a great question, and it points to a really important idea in these teachings, which is how interconnected everything is. It's true that the mind projects the world, but the mind itself arises from this self.
So the world is like a manifestation of the self, but not the self itself.
Exactly. It's like a wave on the ocean. It's part of the ocean, but it's not the whole ocean.
Okay, I think I'm following. So how do we stop our minds from constantly spinning these illusions that cause us so much grief?
That's where the practice of what's called self-inquiry comes in.
Okay, tell me more about this self-inquiry. What is it? How does it work?
The text tells us to repeatedly ask ourselves, who am I?
Really? So I just keep asking myself, who am I? Over and over again.
You don't have to do it nonstop, but the idea is that this question acts like a reset button for your mind. Anytime you get caught up in your thoughts, anxieties, or distractions, you gently ask, who am I?
So it's kind of like hitting the pause button on all that mental chatter.
Yeah, you could say that, but it goes even deeper. The text actually says that if you keep asking, who am I, it eventually dismantles all other thoughts.
Wait, dismantle all my thoughts? But isn't thinking a good thing?
It's not about getting rid of thinking entirely. It's about transcending the ego, which is that sense of a separate I that's constantly chattering and creating illusions. Remember, we talked about the I thought being the first one that usually pops up.
Right, like I'm hungry or I need to check my phone.
Exactly. And so this practice of self-inquiry, it aims to dissolve that I thought by constantly bringing your attention back to the source of awareness itself. It's like pulling the plug on that projector that's making the illusion.
Okay, this is pretty intriguing.
Yeah.
But is asking, who am I, the only way to, like, quiet the mind? What about other practices like meditation or breath work?
Those are all great practices, and the text acknowledges them, but it emphasizes that they're secondary to self-inquiry.
So are those practices kind of like training wheels? You know, they can be helpful, but ultimately, self-inquiry is the real deal.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Things like meditation can help to calm and focus the mind, but they don't address the root of the problem, which is that I thought itself.
Like trying to fix a leaky faucet by mopping up the water instead of actually tightening the pipe.
Right, you gotta go to the source. So self-inquiry, it tackles that I thought directly.
This is really fascinating, but before we get too deep into that, let's talk about the role of God and the guru on this path to self-realization. Where do they fit into all of this?
Oh, that's a great question, and we'll definitely dive into that. Are they essential? Can they grant us liberation directly? We'll pick up with those questions and more right after this. So before the break, we were just starting to touch on this idea of God and the guru in relation to self-realization.
Yeah, you know, I'm really curious about that. If we're trying to realize this inner self, where do God or a guru even come into the picture? Like, are they essential? Can they just, grant us liberation?
Well, the text explains that while they can certainly guide us, they can't actually give us liberation directly.
So it's more like they're spiritual mentors. We still have to put in the effort ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Imagine you're lost in a really thick forest. A guide can point you towards the way out, but they can't physically carry you there, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But the text does mention this thing called the grace of the guru. What exactly is that? Is it like, I don't know, some kind of magical power?
Well, there's this really powerful analogy they use in the text to explain it. It compares the guru's grace to a prey that's caught in a tiger's jaws, like there's just no escape.
Wow. That's intense.
It is. And similarly, the text says that those who come within the reach of the guru's grace are, saved and won't lose their way.
Okay, so the guru's grace sounds pretty powerful, but it's not a substitute for our own effort, right?
Exactly. The text makes it very clear that each of us, through our own individual effort, needs to follow the path shown by God or the guru to reach liberation. It's not something that just happens to us passively.
So it's kind of a partnership. We need the guidance, but we're ultimately responsible for taking those steps.
Absolutely. The text actually asks this question. It says, does someone named Rama need a mirror to know that they are Rama?
Well, that's interesting. What does that even mean?
Well, it's saying that we have to see our true nature for ourselves with our own eye of knowledge, so to speak, not through someone else's eyes.
Okay, I get it. It's not enough to just have a guru telling us who we are. We have to actually realize it for ourselves.
That's the heart of it. They can point us in the right direction, but the actual journey of self-discovery is our own.
This is making me feel pretty empowered, actually. It really puts the responsibility and the possibility, right in our own hands. So I want to shift gears a little bit here. The text also talks about the nature of happiness and liberation. What's the connection there?
Well, the text says that happiness is the very essence of the self. It's not something that you find in, external objects or achievements.
So it's not about getting that dream job or the perfect partner or, winning the lottery.
Nope. Those things might bring some temporary pleasure, but true happiness, lasting happiness, it comes from realizing your true nature, which is already complete and joyful in itself.
But, our minds are constantly looking for happiness out there in the world. I know mine is. So how do we break free from that pattern of always chasing after things?
The text says that when the mind goes looking for happiness in external objects, it just ends up creating more suffering for itself. But when our desires are fulfilled, even for a little while, the mind goes back to its source, the self, and it gets a taste of true happiness.
So it's like we're constantly chasing shadows, but the real treasure's been inside us all along.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, there's this example in the text of someone who keeps moving from the shade into the sunlight and then back into the shade again. They can never find lasting comfort.
Oh, that's funny. They could just stay in the shade the whole time. It's cool and pleasant there. Why keep going back and forth?
Well, that's the whole point, right? The wise person, the text suggests, they stay in the shade permanently, which means they rest in the self, the source of true happiness.
So true happiness isn't about constantly chasing after things. It's more about cultivating this inner state of peace and contentment that comes from knowing who you really are.
Right. And this state of resting in the self, that's essentially what liberation is all about. It's realizing that your true nature is already free and blissful, It's not something you have to achieve or earn.
This reminds me of those moments when I've felt a deep sense of peace, like during meditation or being in nature, or even just, having a moment of connection with someone I love. Those times feel like a glimpse of what it might be like to really rest in the self.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Those moments can be really powerful reminders of our true nature. And that's kind of the beauty of this whole self-inquiry thing. It helps us see through the illusions that keep us trapped in suffering and helps us realize that, hey, freedom and joy are actually our birthright.
This is all so interesting. We've covered so much today, but it feels like we've barely scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so much to think about and reflect on here. But before we wrap things up, I want to highlight one more really fascinating point from the text.
Okay, what is it?
So we've been talking about this idea of the world as an illusion, like a dream. But the text goes a step further and asks, what if this is the dream, and waking up is actually realizing who you truly are beyond all these temporary identities?
Whoa, that's a pretty mind-bending thought.
Yeah.
So our everyday experience of the world, everything we think we know about ourselves, could all be a dream. And true awakening is realizing our true self.
Exactly. It's a powerful concept, right? It challenges us to question literally everything we believe about ourselves and the world around us. It's like stepping outside the dream and seeing things from a totally different perspective.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be thinking about that one for a while.
Hmm?
So, if realizing our true self is like waking up from a dream, what does that even look like? Does it mean we suddenly get, superpowers?
Not quite. While some spiritual traditions do talk about supernatural abilities and things like that, Ramana Maharshi's teachings focus on a different type of awakening. It's more about seeing the world clearly, without all those distortions and filters of the ego. It's about letting go of that story of me and experiencing reality in a more direct way.
So less about gaining powers and more about losing the illusions that are clouding our perception.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the true nature of reality and, our place within it. And to kind of illustrate this point, the text uses the analogy of silver appearing in mother of pearl.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm following. What does mother of pearl have to do with waking up?
Well, it's like this, just as we might see that shimmer in the mother of pearl and think it's real silver, we often look at the world and think it's this, completely solid and separate thing from ourselves.
But in reality, it's all interconnected and it's all a manifestation of the self.
Exactly. The text says that the self is the only truly real thing, and the world, our souls, even God, they're all like appearances within it.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea. It's like saying everything we perceive, even God, is ultimately a projection of our own true self.
It is a big shift in perspective, yeah. And it can lead to a very deep sense of unity and connection with everything and everyone around us. We're not these separate, isolated beings. We're all part of this larger whole.
I can definitely see how that realization would be incredibly liberating. Instead of feeling like I'm alone, struggling against the world, I could actually experience myself as part of something much bigger, much more harmonious.
Right, exactly. And that often brings with it a profound sense of peace and joy.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've explored the nature of the self, this idea that the world might be an illusion, the power of self-inquiry, and the concept of liberation. It's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah. But it's worth really taking some time to just sit with these ideas and see how they resonate with you personally. You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself and the world around you.
And for anyone who is feeling inspired to keep exploring, we definitely recommend checking out the source material ourselves, Who Am I? By Ramana Maharshi. It's a short book, but so full of wisdom.
It's a great place to start for anyone interested in self-discovery and exploring the nature of reality.
So to wrap up this deep dive into the question of who am I, let's leave our listeners with one final thought. If the world really is like a dream, like an illusion, What does it truly mean to wake up? What are we waking up to?
Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and most importantly, trust that inner compass of yours. This journey of self-discovery is a lifelong adventure, and it's one that only you can take.
You know that analogy of the silver in the mother of pearl we talked about before? That one's really been sticking with me.
Yeah, it really highlights how easily we can mistake something for what it's not, based on our perceptions.
Like we see the shimmer, and we just assume it's real silver. And in the same way, we see the world, and we think, oh, this is it. This is the solid, fixed reality.
Exactly. But the text is inviting us to consider that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story.
Right. It's not that those things don't exist at all.
No, not at all. It's more that they exist within, like, a much larger context, like a field of awareness that we're usually not really tuned into.
So it's less about denying the reality of the world and more about recognizing that our usual way of seeing it might be, well, a bit limited.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're shifting from seeing everything as, like, separate and isolated to recognizing this deeper unity that's always present.
And I mean, I can see how that could be a huge relief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of feeling like I'm just this tiny, insignificant self battling against the world, I could actually experience myself as part of something so much vaster and, I don't know, more harmonious.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's like this profound shift from a sense of separation to a sense of belonging, of being part of this incredible interconnected web of existence.
This whole conversation has been so mind-expanding. We started out questioning, who am I? That we explored this idea that the world might be kind of like an illusion, and now we're talking about waking up to this deeper reality. Phew, it's a lot to take in.
It is, but you don't have to grasp it all at once, intellectually. The real key is to approach it as this ongoing journey of exploration, of opening yourself up to new ways of seeing and experiencing.
And for anybody listening who wants to keep going deeper, we definitely recommend checking out the source material for this deep dive, Who Am I? By Ramana Maharshi.
Oh, it's such a good read.
It's a short book, but man, it's really packed with insights that can really shift your perspective.
It's a great starting point, for anyone who's really interested in this kind of self-discovery and exploring the nature of reality.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the question of who am I, let's leave everyone with a final thought to ponder. If the world really is like an illusion, like a dream, what does it actually mean to wake up? What are we waking up to?
That's a big one. I think the invitation here is to keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and most importantly, trust that inner wisdom that you have. This journey of self-discovery is a lifelong adventure, and it's one that's uniquely yours to take. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time for another